Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It is September the 3rd, Labor Day weekend. I hope you're having a happy one. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, today is a happy day, right? We hit on the Chris Eubank, who was an underdog, believe it or not, to win the fight, and we hit on the hedge, which was the under 10.5 rounds. In other words, the halfway point of the 11th round. So, more beer for us. I want you to treat your friends well at the pub. And let me just say, I'm going to roll over the winnings here to an NFL football game happening week 1, right, which is next weekend. I like the Jacksonville Jaguars on a money line. You're going to have to pay a little bit over the Indianapolis Colts, right? Just food for thought. The line right now is a little bit high. It's at 5. If you got in early, you got it around 3. We're not going to play with this elevated line. We're just going to throw some on the money line. I believe you're getting the Jaguars at a minus 220. Let me just point out that that's a game involving a rookie quarterback for the Colts. And of course, the Colts are playing against one of the more underrated teams in the NFL right now. Just look at how the Jags handled the last month of last regular season. Anyway, let's get back to boxing. You know, this bet really made itself. You want to take what the casino gives you. The first fight. What I want people to do is to look at that first fight. Eubank comes out, starts fast, in my opinion, wins the first 3 rounds. But more importantly, I want you, in looking at that first fight, to notice the number of uppercuts that Eubanks is landing. In other words, Eubanks already has Liam Smith timed. Smith keeps walking in. He keeps walking forward. And Eubanks had already figured out how to split his defense. Now, what happened in that fight, and it matters because of the adjustment that took place in this fight. What happens is Eubanks is lackadaisical on defense. He's leaning backwards right into Liam Smith's wheelhouse. Understand, Smith throws a pretty good right hook, but he needs a little bit of space on that right hook. He doesn't really lead with the left hook, but he has a pretty good left hook when he opens up with both hands. So Eubank blows the spacing in the first fight, is leaning back a little bit, gets hit with a right hook, and then everything falls apart. Understand, too, Eubank, careless, had never been knocked down. He allows himself in that first fight to be over by the corner, where there's nowhere to go. So when Liam Smith opens up, he has Eubank with nowhere to go in the corner. That first knockdown of the first fight happens with Eubank up against the ropes. So then, of course, we get the second knockdown, and by that point, Eubank is spent, right? Beaten up in that last round. So, of the first fight, right? Round 4. So just understand how much of a gift the casino offered you, right? Knockouts cause amnesia. I encourage gamblers in any fight involving a knockout to carefully go back over the fight and to ask yourself, was this structural? In other words, was the knockout victim getting methodically beaten up and then eventually the dam broke? Or was this a bad situation in the last round where a fighter got careless, got caught, never recovered, was diminished after getting caught? I thought the Eubank situation was clearly the latter. Clearly. Right? So the casino, of course, comes in. They make Eubank, who won most of the rounds the first go-round. I would say he wins 3 of the 4 rounds. right? They made Eubank an underdog. think about that. The casino made him an underdog. Then it's even worse than that. They made the under 10.5 rounds better than even money. So if you thought, you know what, Liam Smith has a punch, has a chance to stop him, even though Eubank is the better boxer, even though Eubank won most of the rounds the first time, you thought, okay, well, Liam Smith did get the stoppage the first time. He has the power to get the stoppage. If Liam Smith is able to land like he did the first time, maybe he gets the stoppage here. Well, just understand, folks, the casino, for that possibility, not only offered you a high over-under, right, 10.5 rounds, but they also gave you better than even money. So I really don't believe that gamblers have to be Einstein, even though I do find people who gamble to be really savvy, smarter than most, right? But here, you didn't even have to be smarter than most. You just thought, wow, I think Eubank is the better boxer. He was landing uppercuts. He had figured out Liam Smith's defense within the first third of the first fight, right? You know, within the first 4 rounds, they gave you him at better than even money. And then you thought, you know, Smith has a punch. Maybe he lands sometime. Here they gave you the high over-under, and they gave you better than even money. So we were the casino's huckleberry here. Turns out that the actual huckleberries were everyone else. Right? Understand, the Chris Eubank who lost to Billy Joe Saunders no longer exists. Right? I always tell people, look, don't go by a person's GPA leaving high school at 18 or leaving college at 21. Right? If you're thinking of hiring someone, you need to ask a more foundational question. Is this person still learning? Is 18 or 21 who the person was years ago? Are they the kind of person who is online actively investigating and learning whatever they're doing? Are they the self-motivated person who learns new skills? Are they the person who isn't satisfied having a fastball? They need to come up with an off-speed pitch. They need to figure out how to locate the fastball better. They want to be their best, and so they keep learning. So, what I want people to do here is to just realize that when Michael Jordan entered the NBA, he did not have that turnaround jumper. When Magic Johnson entered the NBA, he did not have that set three. Right? Steph Curry, for all the great shooting, one year Curry led the league in steals. Look it up. Right? Jerry West. By the way, Jerry West needs to be in the conversation when we're talking about the great point guards. I know many of you are saying Jerry West is a point guard. Jerry West, believe it or not, led the league in assists one year. Right? Jerry West, the great shooter, Jerry West, the great defender, led the league in assists one year. That's something Jordan didn't do. Right? So you show me a great, and I'll show you someone who has kept learning. Wilt Chamberlain arguably plays his best basketball in the later 60s when he led the league in assists. Right? So, Chris Eubank, I'll just say this. The Eubank who fought Billy Joe Saunders was limited, especially the first half of that fight. He was living off his father's name. I'm just telling you that the guy who exists today has spent his career learning. he spent his career improving. Right? His problem, and it's a big problem, just looking forward, isn't Liam Smith. Right? No. His problem is a guy named Eubank Akim Kaluli. Right? Who I think is the best at 160 pounds. By the way, Eubank is actually fighting El Capo, Vincenzo Gualtieri, for the unified belt at 160 pounds. Right? When you think of Eubank, just understand you're talking about, in my opinion, one of the most skilled fighters in not just the middleweight division, but quite frankly in the sport. Right? And again, I'm somebody who picked Billy Joe Saunders. I've watched Eubank grow up. Eubank has another problem, and that's age. Father Time waits for no one. I believe Eubank's around 33 or something like that. But just understand, skill-wise, again, skill beats will. Skill-wise, this fight's not close. So what I want to do is to highlight three strategies, three things about Eubank that should leap off the page as you watch or rewatch this fight. Right? Now, keep in mind, the first fight, Eubank gets a little lackadaisical. He's landing uppercuts. Then he leans back. The spacing's bad for him. Not just in front of him, where he gives Liam Smith too much room to throw that big right hook, but behind him, where he's over by the corner. Right? This fight, folks, it's a master show in the first round. Chris Eubank decides he's going to come in and clinch Liam Smith. Right? He's not going to be back up against the ropes, leaning back, giving Smith room to throw the right hook. No, he's going to smother Smith. Folks, it's masterful. This is what separates boxers. Eubank is able to come in, he's able to put his head, literally, put his head on Smith's left shoulder. So Smith doesn't have any room to throw his right hook. None whatsoever. Then, of course, Eubank makes it even worse than that. Eubank shows you that he can put his head on either shoulder of Liam Smith. He has Smith completely smothered. Smith is trying to throw his right hook, but Eubank is too close. It's even worse than that. You want to know how good Eubank was, and by the way, he's smothering Smith in the middle of the ring, not over by the ropes. You want to know how good Eubank is at clinching today? When Eubank gets off Smith a little bit, Smith throws the right hook. Eubank doesn't go backward. Right? Doesn't make it so Liam Smith can double up on that right hook and hit Eubank as he's backing up. No, Eubank has the timing down so well that Eubank goes forward. There are moments where Smith is throwing right hooks and they miss Eubank entirely and fly over Eubank's head. Right? Also, Eubank is tying up Smith to the point where sometimes he gets Smith's head under his arm. Now, the referee's actually pretty good. So the referee is talking to Eubank, warning him against using his headlocks to try to wring Smith's neck. So Eubank is clever. Eubank realizes, hey, I don't want to get called for excessive holding here. I'm just going to have him under my arm long enough to then let go of him. Right then, I'm going to come inside and I'm not even going to clinch him. I'm just going to put my head on his shoulder. Right, folks, this is top-notch stuff. This is the kind of stuff, by the way, that Tyson Fury did against Deontay Wilder in their third fight when Fury needed to clear his head. This is the stuff that Fury did against Otto Wallin. I'm just naming a great fighter who understands the value of spacing and clinching and defense. This is the same stuff Fury does against Otto Wallin when he's bleeding. And he couldn't risk being away from Wallin, having Wallin have more access to his cut, and having the referee see the extent to which Fury was bleeding. Right, by the way, there were 2 times when Fury came very close to losing his lineal title. Right? The first is when the count reaches 9. In his first fight against Deontay Wilder. I would argue the other time is when Fury, in fact, there's a third time. The second time is when Fury is profusely bleeding. Against Otto Wallin, that fight could have been stopped. And the third time is when Fury gets up for the last time. He's knocked down twice in the same round by Deontay Wilder in their third fight, and Fury comes out for the next round buzzed. Well, let me just tell you here, Chris Eubank knows he made a mistake the first fight, being lackadaisical on defense and leaning back into a right hook. This fight, the first round, he sets the tone. He smothers Liam Smith. Let me point out, too, that this style was tailored for Liam Smith. Because understand, had Eubank been fighting Floyd Mayweather, Mayweather would have come in at a side profile. Mayweather would have been flashing one of boxing's best left hooks. Right? Understand, Shane Mosley's on record as saying that Mayweather hit like another one of his opponents, Canelo, who I consider to be one of the hardest punchers pound for pound in boxing. Right? A Mayweather wouldn't have given a Eubank the opportunity to clinch him. And Usyk, let me name another elite fighter, is hard to clinch because Usyk's feinting and moving. Right? Eubank would have had a problem against that level of fighter. He was fighting Liam Smith. Right? Liam Smith is right there in front of him, parallel to Eubank, so Eubank knew he could clinch him. He did that masterfully. Let's talk about a couple other things. You know, Eubank in this fight, just like in the first fight, is throwing uppercuts early to split Liam Smith's guard. Understand, many guys who throw uppercuts wait until they feel comfortable before they start throwing uppercuts, because an uppercut's a dangerous punch. If I throw the uppercut, then I'm naked on the other side of the uppercut, because my hand is being used for the punch and I'm exposed. You have to have timing. You have to figure out the sequence to know that you have the opportunity to throw uppercuts. Let me say, too, I fault Liam Smith for this. You're fighting a guy and you're hit with several uppercuts the first go-round. Where's the adjustment the second fight? How are you getting hit with uppercuts in the second fight? Now, as I've said, if you look at films of, George Foreman, if you look at films of Evander Holyfield against Mike Tyson, for example, you're going to notice that these guys have an arm bar here. If you're going to be in the pocket like Liam Smith, and Smith should have moved more, but if you're going to be in the pocket against the guy who in the first fight showed that he could hit you with multiple uppercuts, wouldn't you have an armbar here? Wouldn't you have some defensive construct where you're either turned and you're not giving him the uppercut angle, or if you need to be parallel to him, wouldn't you have an armbar? Smith had no armbar. So understand, Eubank tees off. Right? Eubank is not a fastball pitcher who says, hey, I have a great right hook. Let me try to land it. No, this is the guy who throws so many punches, different types of punches, that if you have a hole in your defense, he can say, okay, this guy is open for an uppercut. That's what he throws. It almost takes Liam Smith's head off. Right? Liam Smith is hit repeatedly with uppercuts throughout this fight. Finally, let me say this too. And this is real advanced stuff to me. I want you to look at Chris Eubank's left knee. It's the knee as he stands in an orthodox stance that's on his front leg. Right? Just understand, there are a lot of guys who are great at feinting. Right? Usyk is spectacular at feinting, practically paralyzed Daniel Dubois. Right? Dubois, you would have thought, would have just jumped inside, taken shots to trade shots. I know Derek Chisora is upset he didn't, but Usyk's feinting. So Dubois, even without punches being thrown, is hesitant to jump inside. Well, Eubank has a spectacular foot feint. It's spectacular. Right? Just like a pitcher in baseball who has an awkward windup and you can't figure out his release point, where he's letting go of the baseball as part of his throwing motion. Eubank has a spectacular front leg feint where he'll be throwing a punch and you think you have it timed until he does weird things with that left knee, right? Where he looks like he's throwing a punch, he moves the knee, then you notice he moves the knee a little bit more than you thought he would. This is the guy who, while he's throwing punches, is changing the speed of the punches. He's feinting as part of his punch-throwing motion. Right? Once you see it, you can't look away from it. That front leg, he has you guessing as he's throwing a punch. This isn't the guy who's feinting, resetting, then throwing the punch. No, this is the guy who is throwing the punch and knows that he's going to lean his leg a little bit as he's throwing the punch. Threw off the timing of Liam Smith. Smith didn't know where the punches were going. He didn't know when the punches were coming. He was baffled. Right? Let's just say that Chris Eubank is a guy who is still learning the sport. You know, I like to tell people, school never ends. Right? This guy is much better than he was when he was younger. I mean, much better. Right? Whatever happened in the past, people need to realize this guy's a threat to the throne today. Right? What I do believe, though, is that Janibek likely beats him. I'm expecting Janibek to unify the title against Gaultier. And then, you know, I'm guessing because Eubank is box office gold, right? He got over $1 million for this fight. I'm guessing somehow Janibek is going to be in the ring with Eubank, and understand that Janibek is a southpaw and he's a complicated southpaw, right? Excellent in the pocket, side profile, moves, lifts his feet, has a back foot, changes the angles on a great left hand. I think he would give Eubank problems. But I need for folks to realize that skill beats will. Eubank is extremely skilled. What I want people to do too is to realize that there's a lot of poker being played here. Eubank's trainer is Bomac. It's Terence Crawford's trainer. Right now, Bomac looked like he had just woken up and rolled out of bed. Right? These guys might look calm and, Bomac looks casual and stuff like that. Just understand that just like Crawford is one of the most skilled fighters in the sport, right? The stuff that, and I know they just got together a few weeks ago, but the stuff that Eubank is doing is very high level, right? I mean, understand, Eubank isn't even, a uppercut aficionado, but he is against Liam Smith because Liam Smith's open to uppercuts, right? Just understand the hesitation he's doing, the feints he's doing right before he throws punches. Those are the kind of moves that a lot of young fighters don't even think about. So what we had here was a great performance in a fight where Eubank was the underdog. I didn't give a round in this rematch to Liam Smith. I mean, Liam Smith's in trouble before he hits the canvas, folks. I did not give a round to Smith. Understand, over 2 fights, I believe the only round an observer could give to Smith and get some consensus is round 4 of the first fight, when Eubank hits the canvas. Right? So the problem with life is when you're young and you have all the energy, you don't know enough. And as you get older and as you actually get the knowledge, your body's not the same. Unfortunately for Eubank, he's now in his 30s. Janibek, fair enough, is 30 years old himself. But just understand, this version of Eubank is more skilled than any other version of Eubank. Right? All you have to do is look at the level of clinching in the first round against a guy who had just knocked him out. Right? Let me also say this too. As you look at Eubank, I want you to think of Daniel Dubois. Recent fight involving a great athlete who's two-handed. I've seen him knock out people with both hands. Right? He was much younger than Usyk, right? Dubois is still in his 20s, folks. Several years younger than Usyk. And just think about how unable, and I mean this, unable, Daniel Dubois was to get inside and clinch the smaller former cruiserweight. Right? Dubois couldn't get by the feints. Dubois keeps a cushion between himself and Usyk, who's the smaller man. You would have thought the bigger man would have said, hey, I'm going to come in, I'm going to, toss you like a rag doll. Maybe I'll throw some punches. At a minimum, I'm going to do a George Foreman and come in and lean on you so you're carrying my body weight and getting tired and stuff like that. Dubois couldn't do it. Contrast the Dubois fight with the first round of this fight. Here is Eubank against the guy who dropped him. It's the only time in Eubank's career that he's been stopped. Not a loss by decision, but stopped. And against that fighter, Eubank comes in and makes it look effortless. Is effortlessly tying up Liam Smith to the point where Smith can't get off any meaningful right hooks. And I mean any. Right? Also, as I said earlier here, I want you to look at Eubank with the referee, because parts of this fight could have been dodgy. right? Eubank is clinching, but Eubank understood, hey, I'm not going to be penalized for excessive clinching. Right, so there are times where Eubank looks like he could have clinched Smith. He just decides, you know what, I'm going to stay close to him. I'm going to feint like I'm clinching him, then I'm just going to come up and not have my hands around him. Folks, this was the grizzled vet, the cagey vet, showing you what skill could do. Even though Liam Smith was older than Chris Eubank, it's clear that Smith is comfortable in his style. He's a fastball pitcher. He has a certain style. It's front foot heavy. He's going to try to hunt you down, throw a right hook. If it lands, open up. Or dig deep, go to the body, try to work over your body, try to make this a match in the trenches. Right? Just understand, he couldn't even follow that game plan because of Eubank's masterful strategy. Right? The clinching, the uppercuts. Right? You never get trench warfare deep in the pocket. Instead, you got domination that ended by stoppage inside of an over-under that paid you better than even money, as well as, of course, winning the fight with the underdog that also paid you better than even money. Masterful performance. Keep your eye on Chris Eubank. Keep your eye on the middleweight division. Folks, it's loaded. That's how I see it. Galtieri beat Falco, by the way. That's how he got his share of the belt. Interesting fighter, great legs. Let's look forward to that unification match. Just understand, Chris Eubank should clearly be in the mix for what happens in that division. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.